So whenever you're ready, sir.
All right, thank you very much. We'd like to welcome everybody to the City of Hermantown Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for March 16th, 2021. It's currently 7 o'clock in the evening. We're going to start with a roll call of members this evening. Myself, Corey Colquist.
Here.
Tracy Lundeen is not here anymore. Valerie Olette.
Here.
Samuel Clark.
Here.
Shannon Sweeney Jorgensen.
She just joined us.
Okay, so we'll put her down for being here. Beth Wensloff.
Here.
Buckley Simmons.
Here.
And Mr. John Geisler.
Here.
Thank you very much for that. Second up this evening will be the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion on that, please?
Wensloff makes the motion.
Thank you for that. Can we get a second?
Sam Clark with a second.
We appreciate it. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. We've just approved the agenda for this evening. Number 3 this evening is the approval of the minutes from the February 18th, 2021 regular meeting. Does anybody like to make a motion on that or an adjustment to the meeting minutes at all?
Sam Clark, I will motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Thank you, Sam. Can we get a second?
Jorgensen, second.
Thank you, Valerie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Number 4 is public discussion. Does anybody want to speak on anything that's not on this evening's agenda? Not hearing any, we'll move on to number 5, which is public hearings. This evening, 5A has been withdrawn, so we'll move on to 5B. It's an application by the City of Hermantown for a special use permit for the road project associated with Levate Junction in a natural environment shoreland overlay zone. This land area is all within an R3 residential zoning district. Eric, what do you have for us on this evening?
Great. I'm going to share a screen here. So can everyone see that?
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Yes.
I like it when things work. I'm using a different computer this evening. So what this is strictly a housekeeping type of permit issue here this evening. This is the Levate Junction project that is just really started here the last couple of days with some tree clearing. But the project is from Uggstead Road to Levake Road. Once again, it's along the 1 mile stretch of Levake Junction. Attempt to see if I can zoom in here a little bit on these couple shoreland areas. If you see my cursor, it's green area right through here along Uggstead Road, as well as this green area right through here, which is about midpoint along Levake Junction. Those are the 2 natural environment shoreland areas associated with this part of the city. What that is it requires some additional basically review, just an additional permit strictly from the DNR sake. If you remember back a couple meetings ago, we did something similar to this on a bridge replacement project up on Swan Lake Road. So no changes to the project at all. Nothing in the scope is going to change in the project at all. Once again, this is just a special use permit for the grading and filling activities associated with Levake Junction project that's going to be kicking off here in earnest here shortly. And pretty straightforward on that end. I'd be happy to answer any questions that that the Planning Commission members might have.
As somebody that walks on that road once in a while, it's much needed.
This is Valerie. Will there be an assessment to the residents for the work done on that road?
Yes, this is part of our road improvement project, similar to what we did down on Carlson and Johnson Streets. There will be assessment associated with that. I want to say it's plus or minus $9,800. I don't have the exact amount, but it's around that amount for it.
Commission members, any discussion on this evening or any more questions for Eric? Not hearing any, I will look for a motion on 5B this evening.
Jorgensen, motion to approve.
Thank you for that. Can we get a second?
Simmons, second. With the second.
Buckley with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Anybody opposed? Not hearing any, the motion passes. Thank you very much for that. We'll move on to 6, which is continuing business. We're going to get an update on the PUD survey results from Eric.
Great. I'm going to share the screen one more time here. And I'll ask that question again. Can everyone see my screen, please?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Great,
Yes.
thank you. I apologize, my computer doesn't quite like PowerPoint, so we're going to see both the main slide as well as the additional slides there on the side. I'm going to start off this discussion this evening, and then Josh and Justin from the ARDC are going to be joining us as well and have a brief presentation. And at that point, we'd really like to engage the commission members on their thoughts about the PUD with between myself and the ARDC, kind of leading that discussion that way. The slides that I'm about to show you are generally a cleaned up version of the 14 questions that you received. That was part of our PUD, and then obviously that you've all seen here as well. But these are the associated results with that. As you can see, the vast majority of the people, over 93%, were familiar with what a planned unit development was as it applies to the city. Move this over here. There we go. So we had a series of other, lack of better words, choose and answer sort of type of questions associated with this. And do any of the following cause concern for you? We had really 3 that really jumped out as far as the number of people that responded to that. Lack of variety of housing options within Hermantown, need for workforce/affordable housing, and development costs of new construction. Some kind of the middle of the pack type of answers, overcrowding in the Hermantown School District, increased traffic due to development, as well as consumption of land area associated with large lot development. A couple people were not concerned with any of the above mentioned type of items associated with that. As you can see that new construction and home sales, and we've been looking at this over the past year, it's risen to about $445,000. And the question was, do we see a concern with that? And about 2/3 of the people did, and a third did not. Obviously, people coming in new to our community are looking for different housing options. This is probably going to be more of a concern for them versus a longtime resident of Hermantown who really likes seeing the value of their homes increase. And then obviously as well that residential constructions has increased 24%, probably in the last 2 days, but definitely since 2015. And once again, do you see this as a problem with 3/4 of the people saying that, yes, they do view that as a problem. Obviously right now we're in some strange times with COVID, and building construction costs have gone through the roof. Honestly, that's why item 5A was withdrawn this evening, is the person who'd been budgeting $30,000 for the work was hearing that it was an approach about $80,000. So when you see those type of number jumps just on material costs, people start really thinking or rethinking the ability to build. I even saw an article in the Star Tribune this afternoon that people are starting to cancel contracts for new housing construction just based on the increased costs that are happening to us right now. And then looking to get some more information from people, what they believe is some of the items that are driving up the cost of housing. Really the increase in building material, as I just referenced. Available housing does not meet the needs of the current population. And then competition, that there's not enough residential homes or units available to meet the growing demand. The city in the past has also looked at a couple housing studies that have been done primarily through St. Louis County and the city of Duluth. And both of those have indicated that there is definitely a shortage of housing products out there in this whole area in general. And they foresee a need going into the future for more type of housing types and just units in general. So then we start getting into some of the meat of this. Would you be open to new housing types within the R3 zoning district as a way to address the shortage? About 69% were yes, that they were responsive to that. 20 indicated a maybe, 3 with a no associated with that. And there's a couple people that did not believe that there's a housing shortage within the city of Hermantown. I mean, right now, I can tell you that as far as available residential lots, we're really down to sub 10 available building lots in our traditional subdivisions that we have. There's a couple left in Jackson Estates 4th edition. I think there's maybe one remnant lot up in Maple Village. And hopefully within the next couple of months, we're going to get about 6 new lots online in the Peyton Acres development. And I believe there's still approximately 6 or 7 lots available in the Kevin Kuklis development, which is at the corner of Ugstead and Arrowhead Road. So right now, not a lot of available lots as far as the city goes at this point. So we are in a deficit as far as available building lots at this point. Getting into the question, are you favorable for any following types of development within the R3 district? 69% were still in favor of the traditional half-acre lots that we have. We're seeing about 62% with the small single-family homes. Now, you could pick more than one answer associated with this, because right there you say, well, that's 130%. But people had the ability to choose multiples. Twin home duplexes, almost 85% people had basically a comfort level of that. Getting into 3 and 4 plexes, those are hanging out in the 55% range. And then apartments, people are referencing 46% associated with that. So then to try to narrow this down a little bit further, we started asking questions about, how do you access some of these planned unit developments? Are they lots with access to county roads, i.e. Maple Grove, LeBake, Arrowhead? Are they lots to major city roads with Stebner, Ugstead, or Hermantown? Some people were not concerned about access, and that was actually the vast majority of people. That was almost 47%. And then we did have a small percentage, almost 7%, that were not in favor of any of these different type of developments associated with it. So really for the, other than the non-concerned, about 31% were coming in that they wanted to see some sort of access to a county road system. Once again, Maple Grove, LeBake, Arrowhead, Haynes, or Morris Thomas. So what degree or level of PUD development are you comfortable with? As I said before, standard R3 zoning is 2 units per acre. Almost 0.5% of the people were looking at the mid-density, which is at 3 to 7 units per acre. And if you recall a number of meetings ago, when we first initiated this planned unit development moratorium, we had identified 3 units per acre as the basically the threshold before we start getting into developments that would trigger that moratorium. There was approximately 27% that were looking at high density, which is 7 units per acre or greater. And then 24 were just with the standard R3, basically 3 units or below, almost like the standard zoning that we have here today. So this question is a little bit more to help pin down sort of development, even particularly if you get into higher density, is what's a minimum lot size that you feel comfortable with that type of development. That 31% were in favor of lots 2 acres or larger, which starts opening up quite a bit more parcels within the city. 38% were in that 2 to 5 acre range, which starts tightening that up. That 5 to 10 still almost was coming in there at about 21%. And then greater than 10 acres is 11. So you start looking in at 5 to 10 and greater acreage sites, that really starts reducing these areas where planned unit developments in general could happen. So if that's something that we end up going towards a minimum lot size, there may be more discussion on, what type of density would be associated with those type of development, those type of lot sizes as well. So if apartments were to be allowed in an R3 district, what's the criteria that you're comfortable utilizing? For the most part, it was height restrictions, minimum lot size, maximum allowed units, and specific locations within the R3 zoning. And then there was almost 18% that said that they were not in favor of that R3s, of the apartments in an R3 zoning. Let's start to grab some more information, people asking the questions of whether they strongly agree, ranking down to strongly disagree on the type of question. So to better understand the impacts, please rate how you feel about allowing more housing types or options within the R3 district. So 47% strongly agree that the ability to allow more, 31% agree. We have about 13% neutral, and then getting into about 9% either disagree or strongly disagree. So those people tend towards keep the R3 zoning as it is, which generally tracks with the other questions that we've had associated that way. And then lastly, what are the reasons for ranking in the previous, and the ones that really try to jump out at you? People believe it would make a good use of existing infrastructure. There's a lesser amount of people that were concerned about it would require necessary infrastructure. One thing to note is currently with the city, if a residential builder comes in, the residential developer is responsible for the cost of those infrastructure improvements. So that's a cost that's borne by the developer, but hence it does tend to bring the cost of the lot up as well. People believe that 25 or 55% believe it could be a good way to preserve our natural features by the clustering or grouping of homes. Unfortunately, a lot of our lots that we have here in the city are either impaired by poor soils or particular wetlands. We have some lots that have some a little bit more extreme topography, but for the most part, it's wetland. And so you start looking into what we call these cluster developments, getting these smaller lots within tighter areas, and that way preserving some of the wetland structures that we have throughout the city that way. Then getting into some of the other areas, negative increase in traffic, 22%. And that's one thing I've been discussing with the ARDC is for some of these PUDs, or all PUDs, we'd have to look at the level. Do we start requiring traffic studies or reports associated with those to help answer those questions? And obviously, fire and emergency responses are always a question that way as well, when you start bringing in more development that way. So that outlines the survey. I think we got some really good data and information out of there. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have at this point. And then after that, I'd turn it over to Josh over at the ARDC.
Eric, if I may, one of the things that I think about as I'm looking through, and actually as I was taking the survey personally, was I wonder about how much we are looking at all of this through a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens when we're thinking about development. We've talked a little bit about workforce and housing availability. We've talked a little bit about affordability because, I mean, frankly, $445,000 for a home is not affordable for the majority of people. So I'm just wondering, I don't know that the city necessarily has a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative, but it is something, given the climate of the country And given the climate of things that are going on politically, that I feel like we should be considering as we move forward with some of these things. And I'm just wondering if you have any insight to what considerations are being made in that regard.
Well, we currently do not have anything on the ordinance or regarding that, any of those things. I will, when Josh comes on, I'm going to put him on the spot a little bit, but they had done, and I believe it's in your packet too, a matrix that started talking, I believe, about, I'm just talking generally more like social issues, like you're saying, that, what of those 10 communities that they looked at, how many had provided that sort of, within their PUD requirements that way. But currently, no, that the city does not have those. To date, there's been nothing specifically discussed that way. We've just been looking at more of that 10,000 foot level on what can be done more purely from a cost standpoint of these lots that way. Because right now, I mean, obviously, a lot of things are market driven, and what can the city control as far as allowing more different type of housing types in here. And the big thing of that is the allowance of these PUDs. The city is looking at potentially a new zoning district in the future, and we are going to be looking further into at least a minimum the housing component of the comp plan to something, I'll say near term. But even those two, the rezoning, particularly the comp plan amendment, those are like 18 to 24 month documents that way. So we feel that this PUD, at least by getting this moving forward, that's something that we can, start discussing the housing a little bit more at this point, and then delving into that a little bit deeper as we get into the potential new zoning district as well as the comp plan portion. Long-winded answer, but the answer is no. We currently have not been discussing diversity, those sort of aspects right now.
I have a question.
Yes, Beth.
When I have, because of being new, I'm not sure some of the past, but in actually being very involved in some of the housing and different parts of the real estate in town, I'm wondering, did you look, we're so different. Hermantown is so different. We've got such wetland. We've got water issues, sewer issues, all these different things. Realistically, was the study done before with our commission to say, okay, here could be a park and here could be a development around it for more apartments, or, not the big apartments, but the smaller ones, and then cluster some things? I know before when we were on the Blandon, we did that for Hermantown and looked at, here could be commercial, here could be residential, here could be some centers. Have you done that here now? And I just haven't, I've tried to find something so far and haven't found anything.
Yeah, nothing really recent. I mean, obviously we have the zoning and
Right.
and a 20-year-old comp plan that briefly touches on some of those things. But I'd worked for the city of Blaine a number of years ago, and we'd gone as far as, like you said, almost ghost platting the entire city, particularly in areas, at that point, a good portion of the city was outside of the urban service area of the sanitary sewer. And so we went that far. And then as a developer would come in, we would almost hold them to that, as this is an area that we envision for this type of development. Once again, we've not gone that far. We're still leaving it more as a developer driven. We're having discussions internally as, once again, can we start facilitating infrastructure a little bit more, and then to help bring in development at that point. Like I said, we've got the marketplace, and primarily most of our city is residentially zoned. And once again, with that, primarily the R3 being a good chunk of it, at least from a zoning standpoint, it pretty ties it in. That's why it shows the importance of at least having the ability to do planned unit development, so you can look at something other than a standard half-acre lot.
Right. I just find it's very difficult to try to plan something for us when I'm listening to these responses and hearing about walkability and paths and everything. We don't have a very easy way to do that no matter what. So we need to be realistic on on what can be, and then really focus on that and go wild with that.
Yeah, definitely. It's as new developments come in, you can start control the ability to have sidewalks, et cetera. As part of the Trails Master Plan, we're looking to create the spine of an accessible trail going from essentially the Wellness Center down to Keene Creek. And then the hope is that other developments that are touching down in that area, they start providing these little feeder tracks off that so we can get into some of that walkability. But it is hard. A number of our subdivisions don't have sidewalks in it, and they're bordering some busy roadways, so it makes it difficult.
Yeah.
Sam Clark, just to kind of follow up on Beth's comment, I guess my personal thoughts are, I'm not opposed to development, and I think there's a lot of different factors that factor into it, but we're almost doing developers a disservice, because in my opinion, going from an R3 zoning for almost the entire city into an apartment complex is quite a jump, and it tends to make people unhappy, and people get unhappy all the time. It doesn't mean that it's right or it's wrong, but I guess as a city, I would be more interested in how can you make the expectation for a developer, because at the end of the day, you're kind of limited by the parcel that you buy. It could be anywhere in the city. We have the PUD process, and I guess in my mind right now, our process is so broad, you can almost do anything just by doing an overlay. So I do like the survey, and I really think it's a good question, or something to consider for the city from a planning perspective. I guess that's where I keep coming back to, is just kind of planning so that developers or people that buy property or want to come into Hermantown understand how it's best for the city with utilities and things like that too.
Yeah, and we before we ever reach the stage at Planning Commission, I won't name the particular site, but there's a property currently on the market that's 10 acres. It's actually really good land. It does need some water and sewer extension, which in turn will cause some roadway improvements. And the cost of the land is high, and people have looked at, can we make these work with duplexes, different things like that. And unfortunately, the cost of this infrastructure improvements, and even the land cost, it just doesn't become feasible. This person, like I said, it's a 10-acre site. They were looking at potentially, 6, maybe 8 twin homes in there for anywhere from, like I said, 12 to 14 units total, and they can't make the numbers work. And so, we have a lot of these discussions. We engage David Wolf, the city engineer, but he likes to say is he's going to put on his consultant hat, and he starts talking numbers with these people that, same thing. It says, what's your planning? Great idea, but this is what you're looking at. You're looking at for $600,000 or $1 million worth of infrastructure improvements. So at that point, your lot cost is going to be approaching minimum of $60,000, $80,000, $100,000. And then what type
so it'd
of
be a radar road, would it, Eric?
Could
So
be.
the other thing I'll say on that is I'm from Wright County. I grew up in Otsego, Minnesota, and my past experiences, that's what it turned into in Wright County. They ghost plotted the entire county, and residential lots for development that were not worth developing were selling for almost $100,000. It's just it's tough.
Yeah, it really is. It is. And like I said, we try to have, we as staff try to provide direction for people coming in and try to figure out ways to facilitate it. But it is, that's the problem. A lot of the parcels we have now are, you hate to say it, but there's a reason they're not developed on, whether it's lack of infrastructure, whether it's wetlands, something is generally, holding it up that way. And so I think once again, it just helps with this PUD that gives people a little bit more options, because, same thing, if you can't make it work with duplexes, you're certainly not going to make it work with single family homes. at least on a standard half acre lot scenario. And the same thing, I mean, I won't say people are beating down our doors for apartments. No, they're not. I mean, we had obviously the one up at PNR that's being built, and then the gentleman who came in last October. But you know, the apartments are expensive. I know, you know, you're talking tens of millions of dollars, and there's not a lot of people up there that sort of have that sort of capacity to pull off that sort of project. So, you know, I think, you know, obviously we keep talking about apartments as part of the R3, but, you know, I kind of think that that's more of an outlier that, you know, than this whole process, that, you know, you're probably going to see more of these developments where you can put in a twin home or a triplex and just kind of take off little bites at a time versus an all in at 10 or 15 million dollars. That's just some personal thoughts.
Well, and I mean, when you're talking about apartment buildings, the lack of land available close to public transportation is an issue also, because I mean, without having that additional infrastructure available, it makes an apartment building less attractive.
Yeah, I mean, right now I said the bus system just really comes on Louwburg. That's the furthest that we get into the city that way. So.
Eric, this is sort of on the other end of the spectrum from the $450,000 homes, but just curious if you know, and maybe I should have done my homework. In the Bel Air development, is there much more room for the mobile homes there if they wanted to expand that for the lower cost homes?
This is Bel Air. I believe this is off of LeBake up there.
Yeah, behind Skyline.
Yep, behind Skyline.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think they're pretty well maxed out where they're at because there's quite a bit of wetland around that property as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
They would certainly like to, but there's not any land to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had actually, I just started here, I want to say 16 or 17, we actually had a mobile home park come offline. It was the Williams mobile home park that had been located off of Ugstad, kind of up by Twin Pines. There'd been a 2 or 3 remnant lot or 20 units left in there, but they have since ceased operations associated with that.
Yeah, that Bel Air, it's a nice little community up there. You know, unlike a lot of those types of developments, that's a nice one.
Yeah, we had I'm trying to remember the name of the development behind the theater, but I believe that within the past couple of years, there was a new owner that came in and was looking to do some improvements in there as well. But the same thing with that one, I think that the vast majority of that one is already built out.
What is the zoning for those? Is that R3 or is that's got to be something different, I would think.
Yeah, I'd have to double check off the top of my head here that if any of what the zoning districts allow. I know in the past, and sometimes it might be a special use permit associated with those.
Okay.
He said, since I've been here, that there have been no developments, or at least mobile home developments that way. So I just have to double check what the current take is from a zoning standpoint on those.
Sure.
Well, I think maybe at this point, I'm going to attempt to give Josh Bergstad the ability to host the meeting from here. Josh, are you with us still?
Yeah, Eric, I am.
Great. Well, Josh, give me a moment here, and
Okay, it looks like I'm the host now. Hello, everyone. I know a few of you, but there's a lot of new faces here, so I'll just introduce myself. I'm Josh Berkstead. I'm a planner with the Arrowhead Regional Development Commission. I'm familiar with some of you and Hermantown because we used to assist more regularly with planning and zoning up there. But so right now we're just helping out on this PUD project. I've got my colleague Justin Otzi here. You want to say hi?
Hey, good evening, everybody. My name's Justin. I'm a planner and I'll be assisting Josh with the project.
Yeah, so Justin is like you said, a planner. He works a lot with the city zoning and planning and stuff too. So he knows all about this fun stuff. So I'm gonna try to share my screen as well. If you have any questions, maybe Justin or Eric, when I share this, I'm probably gonna lose my video thing, so I won't be able to see everybody. So if questions come up, just let me know. I should probably share my screen first. Okay, can everybody see my screen now?
No, not yet. There we go.
Okay, now you're probably looking at the small screen.
Yes.
Okay, okay, so I'm going to do the same thing Eric did then. You think after a year of this, I know how to operate one of these things, but I do not. So tonight we just wanted to go through a little bit of the project that we were brought on to help you with, which is to help you review the planned unit development ordinance. Really quickly, we're just going to review the planning process and scope so you kind of understand where we're at in the process. I want to talk a little bit just about the purpose of the meeting and what we're hoping to accomplish. And then we're going to go over what we found in our review of the comp plan and then the existing PUD ordinance practice, and as well as our review of other communities' PUDs and their uses there. So this process is a 5-step process. We started in January with working with Eric and Joe to develop the survey. We took the results. Once we figured out what we were kind of trying to figure out with this PUD, we identified 10 communities and 1 model ordinance, and we reviewed those against Hermantown's ordinance. That matrix was sent out to you, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then again, we evaluated your ordinance just to see against both some best practices in literature as well as against the other ordinances, just to see kind of how you compared. Were you outlier, or were you where were you at? And then also to start seeing some things that ideas that we could take for improvement or changes after tonight's discussion. And so that brings us to tonight's first meeting. After tonight, we will start doing some more research and developing an array of recommendations that we will bring back to you probably in May. We'll bring back to you, have further discussion, and then refine those with a final report and a plan that we would ask the Planning Commission and Council to kind of ratify that report in June, by the time the moratorium that you have lapses. So it's a quick project, but I think we have everything we need to get it done. So the purpose of this project, a review of the city's use of planned unit development to help the city decide the parameters on how and when to use PUD to help achieve the community's development goals. In tonight's meeting, we're going to present a summary of those first 3 tasks, and then facilitate a discussion about that we hope will help us figure out what we want to look at for recommendations. So it's really, we want to help you. We want to get feedback from you on how and where, and when the community would use PUD, and then what the parameters again on that would be. So starting with our review process, we actually started by just reviewing the different, we collected all the ordinances, reviewed them. And then, one thing that became really important for us to review was the comprehensive plan, because everything that we do in planning and zoning kind of has to flow from the comprehensive plan. So there's this land use pyramid here. Comprehensive plan is the foundation. Zoning is the first and kind of foremost thing you build on that. And in the comprehensive plan and the zoning is where you have the most leeway to do things. I mean, you can you can basically say whatever you want in the comprehensive plan, as long as it's not illegal under some other thing. You know, you can say we're gonna have commercial in this specific area, or we're gonna have a park for every 100 residents, or whatever. You can say whatever you want. And then you start building your things to help you implement that. The first is zoning. And then you have your subdivision, variances, conditional use. And those, you know, and as you go up that pyramid, you start having a little bit less leeway all the way, you know, until, you know, issuing a building permit, if it meets your building code, you know, it's basically, you issue the building permit. And so in our review of the comprehensive plan, I guess summarized, we found 8 things, but that we believe the use of the PUD is consistent with the comprehensive plan, as long as it keeps in mind a few certain things. So as Eric said, the comprehensive plan was developed in 2000 and adopted in 2001. It set a 20-year time window. So we're right at that 20 years. And, you know, what it said was that Hermantown was going to surpass 10,000 people, and that it would continue to attract young and old alike. It also said that, you know, a variety of housing types, including, and these are all listed out in there, 2-family, 3-plex, 4-plex, and multifamily, are envisioned as part of the future housing stock of Hermantown. So what the plan really keyed in on was that it welcomed the growth. It recognized that in order to keep attracting people, it was going to need changes in the housing stock, but it also recognized that those changes were going to create challenges for the community. And so the plan, secondly, envisions 2 areas of the town, a rural area and a suburban area, with that line being generally along Ugstead Road. It goes a little bit further west as you go north. But that line is where in the 2000 comp plan, that line east of Ugstead was what was called the urban services boundary. I think someone mentioned something similar tonight, but you know, that's where the water and sewer and generally paved roads are going to be available in the town. And that's where the city wanted to direct, you know, most of the new subdivision development, basically leaving the area west of that boundary, you know, more rural, generally more rural with the larger lots. Within that urban services boundary, one thing you'll notice in the comprehensive plan, there is no zoning map or future zoning map. There is a map that talks about general land use concepts. And so within that area, within what's called Plan Area 1, which is that urban services boundary, which is, you know, again, the east half, or not quite half, of the city. You know, it talks about maintaining suburban character, preserving critical natural features, phasing residential development, and developing existing and new park areas. If you were to overlay this onto a zoning map, you would see that it is largely R3, but there is, you know, the marketplace, there is where the old R3A multifamily used to be. There are some apartment buildings scattered in here, but it is still largely, you know, largely single family residential. And again, it's where most of the, you know, half acre or 3/4 acre subdivisions exist. And so what the plan said was, you know, the city's growth management policies will be used to achieve moderate density development and mesh new development with existing neighborhoods. And that's really the key, I think, to our conversation around using the PUD within this area is, you know, what is an acceptable density level? What is an acceptable, you know, how do you acceptably integrate different types of housing, which are envisioned? How do you successfully and acceptably integrate them into and throughout Hermantown? And then, you know, the growth management policies that we have focus largely on, talks a lot about, you know, impact of roads, not overloading the roads, talking just both in terms of the actual quality of the infrastructure as well as the amount of traffic, impacts of utilities, the parks and recreation system. And, you know, it says that the city is going to evaluate all new developments on their short and long-term fiscal and environmental impacts, and impacts to, public safety services, so police, fire, ambulance. Again, making sure that this new growth that the comp plan wants to encourage and allow isn't starting to take away from all the things that make Hermantown great. And so in your packet, there were two kind of matrices, I guess. One was what was called the purpose matrix. And this, I just went through each of these ordinances and looked at the purpose statements, which are really important in the planned unit development, because that's where you start getting into what are the reasons that we will use a planned unit development to, and that generally gets back to what are your community's development goals? What are your goals in the comprehensive plan where using a planned unit development would be, appropriate? And you can see there's a long list of items. The two items that were common, that were consistent throughout every one of the planned unit development ordinances that we reviewed, was a variety of housing and neighborhoods, and then efficient services and utilities. That's also common in ours, but that really gets to, I think, two of the key issues that are facing a lot of cities now and into the future is, we don't say affordable housing, but for the variety of housing in neighborhoods. And then, again, how do we, cost effectively deliver those services and utilities? And then other very common things that almost everybody has, preservation, enhancement of nature, mixed use development pops up. But really, after you get past preservation, enhancement of nature, and then the efficient services and utilities, then each kind of PUD starts changing based on the community's goals. You can see the left side, the first 10 or 11 are ours, and then it starts, kind of going off into other ones. And so we reviewed those 10 ordinances, and what we did was we just selected 10 cities. Some of them were based on cities that we had looked at in the past, based on size, based on location, based on them being a suburb of another city. So like Sartell and Sauk Rapids with St. Cloud. We looked at Duluth just because it's in the region. And so when we actually looked at each of those cities, each of them had a PUD ordinance, which we selected them without knowing that. But each of them had a PUD ordinance. Again, encouraging a variety of housing in neighborhoods and efficient services and utilities were part of the purpose of every PUD that was reviewed. From there, it gets a little different because the content of the ordinances vary greatly and with different degrees of variations and specificity allowed. So, with the planned unit development, you offer up flexibility in return for something, and that flexibility can range anything from, like a lot of zoning ordinances say we can vary any of our zoning or subdivision requirements, lot size, setback, height, overall density, a lot of stuff about street types can all be varied within the PUD. Some of the a few of the communities set kind of some limits on these things, but a lot of them really kind of left it very, very unspecified. And where there were limits, it was around height or setback if it was adjoining or coming into contact with another property or area. And then allowing uses not allowed in the underlying zoning district was allowed in 8 of the 10 cities reviewed. So, and specifically in 6 of those cities, the allowance was specifically to allow for any housing type. So, in our case, we have an R3 zone, which allows single family residential. It allows twin family residential, 2-family residential, and I think maybe 3plexes. But our PUD ordinance and many of the other PUD ordinances would allow an apartment building or some other type of residential use within that district. And then, limits on those and stuff, again, are pretty flexible and varied over everything. So that's a really quick summary of the materials we sent out. If you would like, we could spend a few minutes looking at the main matrix, kind of get some idea about what we looked at. Otherwise, I think we would be looking to start it again, a discussion on your thoughts about, hopefully you're able to take it all in, your thoughts about what you heard and what you saw, and then how that relates to, your thoughts about how to use the PUD and what you would like us to start working on to bring back to you.
Well, thanks, Josh, for that. I guess I'd like to encourage all the commission members, thoughts, comments. This is a good work session here for us, so I think this is one of our opportunities here to at least just kind of expounding on what we've heard so far, and probably even your thoughts when you were taking the survey as well.
This is Valerie. I'm just looking at this, and down fourth up from the bottom where it talks about common open space, and it shows Hermantown doesn't have anything for that. It would seem with all the baseball and soccer fields and such that we kind of have that covered. Is that not the case, or is it because it's not in our zoning specifically that's not checked?
Yeah, so common open space, when we talk about it in a PUD, would be the area set aside within that specific development to be used by generally the residents of the development, though sometimes you could make it a public park. And so one of the ideas behind that is, oftentimes with the PUD, you might be shrinking lot sizes, or again, introducing an apartment building, some kind of a apartment building into a development, and and so the common open space is actually meant to provide a usable outdoor space for the residents of that development, so that, yeah, we're giving up half-acre lots. Not everybody's going to have a huge fenced-in backyard, but everybody's going to have a common lawn that they can throw a picnic on or play with their dog on. And so I know it is referenced in our PUD, but it's not in the purpose section. And so the one thing about the common open space where you see it is a lot of the places that really do talk about it, they talk about how it has to be usable for the purpose of open space. So you can't just say, well, I didn't build in that wetland, that's the open space. Well, except for bird watching, it's not a really usable space for the community. Or, that stormwater pond is the open space. So, and so that's where, if I think, I don't know, Beth was talking about developing areas around little parklets or something, that's where like the concept of an open space would come in. Other places talk about it in terms of recreational amenities. Maybe you throw in a little playground or something.
Okay, so Joshua, so in other parts of the country, they may have a pool area or tennis courts, or that's sort of what you're talking about within the community itself.
Yeah, that's definitely an example, but it could just be as simple as, again, like a green, just an open park area with a trail and some benches, you know.
Okay,
And again, that's where a lot of places, you know, in the PUD orders, they talk about it, but they don't get into strictly defining it. And so, you know, that's where it's through the process, you want to make sure that you're getting something usable.
And I believe Josh really hit the nail on the head on that one is like you said, that yes, we have some infill land that's difficult to develop, but not having a plan that just maximizes all that upland space and doesn't provide that green for the residents of that community. So I think that's be a good part of a PUD in some of these moving forward.
That's where I think having the planned park, the open space for apartments, excuse me, is going to be critical. If we don't have places for, even if it's all 55 and older, you want some place for people to go out and enjoy some green space. And if we aren't careful of that sort of the overlay in some areas, I think we're going to miss that, and it's going to come back to haunt us later for not watching that.
Were there any other questions about any of the kind of terms or categories that were included in there?
It's going to take a little while to read all of this to really get it through my head, since we didn't get it that long ago.
And I'm going to jump in right here. I'm thinking back to your matrix timeline, Josh, that I wonder if, like you said, that we give P&Z a little bit of time to digest this and then maybe do this again in April. Because right now we don't have any applications for April, that turn that into another work session to keep expounding on this. Because I think there's a lot of really good information that the ARDC put forward, and then some good information that came out of that survey. And I think that at least if the members have a chance to, like I said, digest it a little bit further, that I think we could have even a better conversation a month from now.
Mhm.
And that's, I mean, how does a P&Z feel about that?
Eric,
I'm
Sam Clark
personally fine
here.
with that.
I'm fine with that too. Is there any leeway if it's just the Planning and Zoning Commission to do something outside just the monthly 7 o'clock? I mean, could we schedule something for like two weeks out or something?
Yeah, we have the ability to do that. We would just call it a work session. I don't think we're hit in, if Councillor Geisler's on, I don't believe P&Z is affected by open meeting laws. I'm not quite sure on that.
I think we are, yes.
Are we? Okay.
Yep.
So
I know
we would-
like the airport planning, planning and zoning for the airport is, so I'm pretty sure that we would need to publicize that.
Sure. Okay. So like
But that's
basically,
easy.
yeah, exactly. But that would be about 2 weeks out by the time we get into the STAR and things like that. So,
I don't even think stars necessary. I think just on the website would be adequate.
oh, okay.
We could
Does that help?
check with Steve, but I think that would be just a website notification.
Okay. Gives us a little bit more flexibility in the timing of that.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
My other question, Eric, would be once we get through this, what does it take is it a new ordinance? Is it an amendment to the ordinance? What's it going to take after we kind of make some decisions?
Yeah, exactly. Myself and Josh and Justin been talking about that. We don't envision it's going to be a total rewrite of the PUD ordinance, that it's going to be, like I said, kind of an amendment, for lack of better words, getting in some of this criteria for, what we envision as the PUD. Once again, establishing some parameters that way. So if you think about the R3 zoning, we have some set charts in there, some maybe more aspects like that. But we're still kind of working our way through that, to tell you the truth.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, I mean, from a timeline standpoint, I'd really like to get this in front of the city council that first week of July, so we don't really have any downtime by the time the moratorium ends. In that, in a perfect world, we'll be sitting at the June meeting at city council with a new ordinance. But once again, we have to see how it pulls together here.
Yeah, time goes quick.
It does.
Eric, have you guys started on the comprehensive plan at all?
No, we have not. We have not.
I guess Sam Clark here again, kind of going off with John and maybe kind of taking off Corey's question. My personal preference would be that if we're going to review this as a planning and zoning commission, that we do it sooner than later, just to streamline things and keep things moving forward.
I agree with that, Sam. I think
no issue.
that would be nice to get that going as quick as possible. That way, if we had to have 2 sessions, we could probably pull that off.
I also think it might be nice just to have a, maybe not at this time of night, but just a little earlier, people can ask questions or have questions prepared. And then just kind of work forward from there.
No, that's great. I really appreciate that that comment, because like I said, it's 4 weeks is a long time from now. That's for sure. I'm just thinking about the format. If it's still a Zoom format at that point, I think ARDC, you still need to work under the that process, I believe, correct?
In 2 weeks, I'd probably be more comfortable doing that. Later on, we might be able to do something else.
Okay.
If we're gonna kind of adjourn the discussion, I maybe wouldn't mind just and turn you all loose to look at this over the next couple weeks. I wouldn't mind just going down the matrix and maybe just giving you a little explainer on the categories, just because these are just how I title them in my mind. So, so in the first one on the main matrix, the minimum size, and that's again just what is the minimum size of area that you have to have in order to do a PUD, and that's pretty explanatory. It's just acres. Flexible land use, that was getting towards that question of could we allow different types of housing or different types of use, and these are again, these are just taken straight from the ordinance. You see, maybe Mankato is missing a thing, but they allow housing of any type. Comp plan reference, that's basically just the language right from the plan where it talks about the comp plan. Flexible dimensional performance standards, again, those are the dimensional standards are, lot width, lot size, building height, building setbacks, and then performance standards, might be some other things like, screening or stuff like that. Density bonuses, I think it's self-explanatory. The underlying zone is 4 units per acre. You can go up to 6 units per acre or 8 units per acre or whatever. And then the last kind of, and then some of these are the things that are kind of supposed to be the things that you do to start getting those different flexibility bonuses. So common open space, we talked about that. Clustering, can you take 40 units that are supposed to spread over 40 acres and put them on 10 acres? Mixed use, self-explanatory. And then some of these things like design standards, conservation standards, it's hard to call them standards when they're unspecified, but, you know, in our ordinance, we talk about, you can do a PUD. One of the things that we do PUD is, you know, that we get in return is better design or better sustainability, even though they're unspecified. And then the last few are landscaping again, kind of the same thing. And then the last couple are just some process things like, is this done through a rezoning? Is it done through an overlay? One community does it as a conditional use permit. And then that was just stuff that, as I read through, kind of popped out that at the time I thought was interesting. And that mostly related to laying out some standards for different street standards within these developments. And so that's basically one thing that I did not look that closely into was the actual application and review process. Though what I did notice was they're pretty similar for the most part.
Josh, when you were just talking performance standards, was there a couple communities that actually identified a height, if I'm remembering back? There wasn't many, if I recall.
There was a couple, and I just closed that. Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to answer this moment, but that's just, you know, as I was just, you know, thinking back to the survey, one of the things that we had identified.
I think
A few of them, it looks like a few of them mentioned that the height must be equal to the setback from adjacent property.
Yeah, so yeah, like I think Oakdale has a maximum height of 45 feet, but a lot of it is looking at how to buffer that height, not within the PUD itself, but against, you know, the neighboring properties. So I mean, there's really you know, the thing about the PUD is that there's really quite a few tools that you can use to not only achieve the desired outcomes, but then also, you know, start to mitigate against any of the things you're concerned about. So, you know, as you start thinking about what your preferred parameters within the PUD are, you know, I think it would also be good just to think about different ways to achieve those parameters through either allowing or not allowing something, or laying out some guidelines for how, you know, for again, some of those tools about height or setback that we could use to achieve that.
The one thing that jumps out at me that might be worth a good discussion here in a couple of weeks is the idea of a density bonus. Because then we start getting in that idea of, you know, defining how many potential units in a particular space. And I think once again, it helps define, so someone knows coming in, well, the underlying zoning's 2 units per acre. If I want 5 units per acre, I have to do this, or 10 units, I'm just saying a number, 10 units per acre, I need to do that. I mean, it starts to quantify it a little bit. Or I think that's where it's always been difficult with our existing PUD, is just like it says in here, it's unspecified. So it's, you know, I think that would be something to kind of start honing in on a little bit as well.
And I think that's true across a lot of these dimensions, is that the things that are unspecified are causing our potential developers to not know exactly what is expected. And then because they're unspecified, it's really allowing the neighbors to have objections and potentially for us to deny things just based on a neighborhood feel versus the actual facts of the situation. You know, you start to get into that whole not in my backyard type of mentality. I mean, there were even a couple of comments within the survey about not wanting group homes, I mean, which is clearly should not be an issue any longer.
Well, what I'll do, unless there's some further comments or discussion right now, I'd like to propose in March 30th, 2 weeks from today. And I might try to do, send out a survey so I can get some input from all of you, some potential times that work out well. And regroup at that point. And maybe even a couple different days. But I'll work on that tomorrow and send that out to the group. But I'd say tentatively, let's figure for, 2 weeks from now, sometime during that week, to at least have this interim meeting. And then, like Joe Peterson said, that it gives us that ability to even hone in that much more at the regular meeting that we have.
I like that idea, Eric, a lot.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Well, great. I think with that, Josh or Justin, did you have anything further this evening, or otherwise, like I said, we'll regroup here in a couple weeks' time.
No, I think that's everything we had. Yeah, we just look forward to having that conversation in a couple weeks, and I think that works good for us. It gives us the time then to get to work on what comes out of that.
Yeah, I think so. And thank you, Sam, for suggesting that, because things get stale after 4 or 5 weeks. So said keep it in the forefront, keep thinking about it. That'd be great.
It's
Thanks,
Valerie.
Josh. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good night. Just
Yep.
curious if there's any